In August 1914, British explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton set out on a mission that no human had ever attempted: to cross the entire Antarctic continent on foot. The plan required sailing the Endurance deep into the Weddell Sea to reach the coastline. From there, Shackleton intended to lead a team 2,900 kilometers across the South Pole, reaching the Ross Sea in approximately 120 days. But the Weddell Sea is partially enclosed by land on 3 sides. This geography prevents dense pack ice from escaping into the open ocean, creating a permanent, rotating layer of ice. By January 1915, this thick pack completely enveloped the Endurance. The ship was immobilized. The crew was forced to settle in for the Antarctic winter, facing months of total darkness and temperatures that plummeted to -50°C. With their ship frozen in place, the expedition's primary advantage of mobility was gone. The mission transformed from a transcontinental trek into a static test of mental and physical endurance. For months, the crew lived aboard the trapped vessel as the shifting ice floes outside began to grind against the wooden hull with increasing force. Frank Hurley, the expedition's photographer, documented the slow destruction, capturing images of the ice as it pushed and squeezed the ship from all sides. In October 1915, the pressure became too much for the wood to bear. The hull began splintering, allowing freezing seawater to flood the lower decks. Shackleton ordered his 27 men to abandon the vessel. They salvaged what supplies they could carry and established a camp directly on the floating ice, watching as the remains of the Endurance finally sank. The loss of the ship ended any possibility of completing their original journey. They were now stranded on the ice, over 1,000 miles from the nearest human settlement, with no way to communicate with the outside world. At Ocean Camp, the crew survived on a drifting ice floe. Rations were limited to a single biscuit and a small portion of meat paste each day, supplemented only by the seals and penguins they could hunt. As the ice began to break apart beneath their tents, Shackleton realized they could no longer stay on the floe. They launched 3 small salvaged lifeboats into the freezing water. They spent days rowing through a landscape of shifting icebergs and open sea, constantly soaked by freezing spray as they searched for the nearest land. After 497 days without standing on solid ground, the crew reached the rocky, glaciated shores of Elephant Island. But Elephant Island was a desolate rock. It sat far from any commercial shipping lanes, meaning the chances of a ship happening to pass by were nearly non-existent. Shackleton knew that staying on the island was a death sentence. Without a way to signal for help, their only option was to launch a single boat back into the ocean. Shackleton selected 5 men to join him on an impossible 1,300-kilometer journey across the ocean to reach the whaling stations on South Georgia Island. They used the James Caird, a 22-foot wooden lifeboat with a makeshift canvas deck designed to keep out the heaviest waves. Their route took them through the Drake Passage, a stretch of water known for 12-meter waves and some of the most violent storms on the planet. Inside the cramped boat, the men endured weeks of constant wetness, freezing temperatures, and seasickness, navigating only by the stars during the rare moments the clouds parted. As they finally neared South Georgia, a massive hurricane struck the island. The winds were so strong that for hours the crew could do nothing but hold on as the storm thrashed their small vessel against the sea. Survival in the passage meant enduring the physical toll of the environment. The men survived by yielding to the storm's power, rather than attempting to fight against the 100-mile-per-hour winds. The storm forced them to land on the uninhabited western side of South Georgia. To reach the whaling station, they would have to travel across the island's interior. They faced a landscape of 10,000-foot peaks and glaciers. At the time, no human had ever successfully crossed the center of South Georgia Island. Shackleton and 2 others began a 36-hour continuous climb. They had no sleeping bags or tents, using only a length of rope and a carpenter's hatchet to carve steps into the steep ice. They finally walked into the Stromness whaling station as unrecognizable figures, their faces blackened by soot and their clothes reduced to rags. Shackleton and his companions had crossed a mountain range that would not be successfully traversed again for another 40 years. They completed the journey without any of the specialized gear used by modern climbers. Shackleton immediately began organizing a rescue mission for the 22 men left behind on Elephant Island, making 4 separate attempts over several months to break through the Antarctic ice. In August 1916, he finally reached them. Despite over 100 days stranded on the island, under the leadership of Frank Wild, every single one of the 22 men had survived. The Endurance itself lay undisturbed for more than a century. In 2022, a search team located the wreck 10,000 feet below the surface of the Weddell Sea, remarkably preserved by the freezing water. Shackleton died of a heart attack during a later expedition and was buried on South Georgia Island, the same place where his crew had found their salvation years earlier. The 1914 expedition never achieved its goal of crossing the continent. Yet, after nearly 2 years of isolation and the loss of their ship, Shackleton returned to Britain with his entire 27-man crew alive.